Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm the Dude, and this is Dude Talks. Today I have kind of a creepy, scary, even disturbing story for you. It's about a man named Ed Gein. Has anybody ever heard of Ed Gein before? I hadn't really either, but Ed Gein's story inspired such iconic Hollywood characters as Buffalo Bill, Norman Bates, and even Leatherface. So, let's talk about Ed's story and his house of horrors. Ed Gein was born on August 27th, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, to George and Augusta Gein. Augusta, his mom, hated her husband George, said he was an alcoholic, he was unable to keep a job, and at one point he owned a grocery store, which he ended up selling whenever he decided to leave the big city of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and move out to the family farm. So he packed up everything and took his family out to Plainfield, Wisconsin. His mom really took advantage of the farm's isolation because she was very protective of her boys, Ed and his brother Henry. So when they were out on the farm, she was able to turn away any outsiders who could have influenced her sons. Now, Ed and his brother Henry spent most of their time doing chores on the farm. Their mom was very religious and often preached to her boys about the innate immorality of the world, about the evils of drinking, and her belief that all women, except herself, were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. She reserved time every single afternoon to read to them from the Bible. Usually, she picked verses from the Old Testament that had to deal with death and murder and divine retribution. Ed and his brother Henry were only allowed to leave the house to go to school. That's it. Ed was even punished by his mother if he tried to make friends. Because of this, Ed was pretty shy, and his classmates remember him being kind of a strange kid. He'd sometimes just erupt in laughter at what seemed to be his own interior monologue. Like the voices in his head were really cracking him up. Fast forward to April of 1940 when Ed's father died. Ed and his brother started working little odd jobs to help cover some of the family expenses. They both worked as handymen, but Ed also liked to be a babysitter because he said that he related easier to kids than he could adults. Now, I can totally understand that. Sometimes I don't want to talk to adults at all, and I'll be that guy that's off in the corner playing with the dog the whole time. Nothing wrong with that. But Ed and his brother had very opposing views on their mother. Henry would often speak ill of his mother, which just shocked and horrified Ed. Later, Henry started dating a woman, and whenever he was planning to move in with her, he told her that he was really worried about his strong attachment to their mother. A few years later, Ed and Henry were out burning some marsh on their family property. Well, the fire got really out of control. So the fire department was dispatched. They put out the fire and left. After they left, Ed reported his brother missing. A search party was now out looking for Henry, and that night, his body was lying face down in the marsh, dead. At first, the fire was to blame, but authorities soon realized that Henry had been dead long before the fire got out of hand, and he also had some bruises on the back of his head, which was strange. The authorities obviously suspected Ed for killing their brother, but there just wasn't enough evidence to prove that. Now, mind you, this is mid-1940s. They don't have all the forensic science that we have today. There was no DNA testing. I'm not sure if there was fingerprints back then. I mean, obviously we had fingerprints, but they weren't able to prove that Ed had killed his brother. So the coroner put down asphyxiation as the cause of death, and that they just had to accept the fact that he died from an accident. Although later on, some of the investigators came forth and said that there was no doubt that Ed had been the murderer. They just couldn't prove it. So, not long after that happened, his mom suffered a stroke, and so Ed devoted his entire life to taking care of his mother. After suffering a second stroke just after Christmas in 1945, about a year later, Ed's mother died, and he was left all alone in the world. So Ed's first order of business after his mom died was boarding up all the rooms that she used, including the entire upstairs, the downstairs parlor, and the living room, and left them completely untouched and pristine, just like his mom left them. The rest of the house, on the other hand, well, let's just say Ed wasn't too keen on cleaning. He moved himself into a small room that was adjacent to the kitchen, and that's whenever he started becoming really interested in pulp magazines, which, nothing wrong with pulp magazines, but he was particularly interested in the Nazi cannibal adventure story pulp magazines. For years, Ed kept to himself. He did receive a small farm subsidy from the government, but he kept doing some odd jobs, working for municipal road crews and crop threshing crews and such. But he led otherwise a pretty solitary life on his farm. But on November 16th, 1957, everything in Plainfield, Wisconsin changed. Bernice Worden was a local hardware store owner who went missing. She had been last seen the previous night and had been reported missing after her hardware store remained closed all day. Now, a witness reported that they had seen a truck drive from the rear of the building around 9:30 a.m. Bernice's son, who oddly enough was the deputy sheriff at the time, got to the store around 5 o'clock and found the cash register open, as well as bloodstains on the floor. So while the investigators and Frank were talking, Frank was her son, Frank Worden. After Frank was talking with the investigators, they figured out that Gein had been in the store the previous night and told Bernice that he was going to be back in the morning for a gallon of antifreeze. Sure enough, there was a sales receipt for a gallon of antifreeze, and that was the last receipt written by Bernice Worden on the morning she disappeared. So, on the evening of that same day, Frank and the police went and picked up Ed in a grocery store parking lot, and the rest of the police force, the county police, went out to Gaines's farm. Now, they had prepared to find Bernice Worden's body on the farm, but what they walked into was a real-life house of horrors. Now, the next few pictures that I'm going to show you are pretty graphic, quite disturbing. If you have a weak stomach, I might want to close my eyes for the next minute or so, because I'm going to go through some of the stuff that the authorities found in Ed's house. Ed had almost completely fitted his entire house with body parts. Authorities found countless bones, both whole and fragmented. They found skulls that were impaled on his bedposts. They found bowls and kitchen utensils that were made from skulls and from other bones. But worse than the bones were the household items that were made from human skin. Authorities found chairs upholstered with human skin. They found a wastebasket made of human skin. They found several chairs that Ed had human skin covering the entire chair. They found a corset made from a female torso that was skin from the shoulders to the waist. They found leggings that were made from human leg skin. They found masks made from the skin of female heads. They found a belt from female nipples. They found a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring. They also found a lampshade that was made from the skin of human faces. They went on to find a young girl's dress and the vaginas of two females that the coroners judged to have been about 15 years old. They also found fingernails from female fingers. They found 9 cut out vaginas in a shoebox, as well as 4 noses, and they also found a stack of female skulls, some of them with the tops completely sawed off. Now, if you haven't forgotten already, they went there to look for Bernice Worden, and her body was found, decapitated. Her head had been hung in a burlap sack, and her heart was hanging in a plastic bag next to the stove. Oh, and her body? Well, it was strung up, upside down, and gutted like a deer. Police also found the remains of another woman, Mary Hogan, who was equally as dismembered. Ed admitted to the shooting of Mary Hogan, who was a bar owner that had been missing since 1954, so she'd been missing for 3 years. And he later denied any sort of memory of any details of her death. Just her face was found in a paper bag, and her skull was in a box. When he was questioned, Ed told investigators that between 1947 and 1952, he stole corpses from 9 graves, although he said he visited about 40 grave sites across 3 different cemeteries while he was in a daze-like state. Now, he would then take the bodies home, where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. But Ed was very specific on the bodies that he exhumed. He wouldn't just steal anybody. Gein robbed the graves of middle-aged women who he felt resembled his mother. He would go soon after the funeral while the graves were not completed and dig them up. He actually took the investigators, after he was captured, to some of the grave sites. The investigators had the coffins exhumed, and they were found empty. Not long after his mother's death is when he began to create a woman suit so that, and I quote, he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. On November 21st, 1957, Gein was arraigned on only 1 count of murder for Bernice Worden, although there were several parts of countless bodies found in his home. Ed Gein pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity and was declared unfit to stand trial. He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was retried once after the doctors believed he could participate in a trial, but was again declared mentally insane. He was confined to spend the rest of his life in a mental hospital and died as one of history's most disturbing serial killers at the Mendota Mental Health Institute at the age of 77 on July 26, 1984. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Next week, we're going to have another scary story for you, so make sure to tune in. And make sure to like, comment, and share as much as you want. Until next time.